So there has been quite a bit of news just in this past week, and we're going to try to cover some of it and try to make it make sense. I mean, I just can't make sense of a lot of this myself. So we'll try, as we talk through this, let's try to make some sense of this. So there's a new book coming out, written by Bob Woodward, who is one of the ones who was involved with the actual Watergate story with Richard Nixon. And so he's been writing that for a long time, but he did come out with this book. And in the book, it's detailed that the top military advisor to President Trump basically undermined President Trump at the time, and now it's coming out and it's, to me anyway, it's a really big deal. So let's look at this story. This is from CNN. 2 days after the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, President Donald Trump's top military advisor, Joint Chiefs Chairman General Mark Milley, single-handedly took secret action to limit Trump from potentially ordering a dangerous military strike or launching nuclear weapons, according to Peril. First of all, why would he launch a strike? You think that he was crazy enough to launch a nuclear strike to remain in power even after the election that I believe was fraudulent, but that's neither here nor there. That nobody, I mean, how crazy is that? They're saying that President Trump was a crazy one, but he was going behind his back to try to prevent this. How do we make sense of that?
No, it's just Trump derangement syndrome, right? Anything you say, you just blow it up and make it as hyperbolic as you can, and it becomes truth because people, or it becomes plausible, I should say, because people believe that Trump is just that ridiculous,
that crazy,
crazy, that vindictive, whatever. And yeah, but there's absolutely there's no basis for such a claim.
So it says, in response, you never know what the president's trigger point is, okay? In response, Milley took extraordinary action and called a secret meeting in his Pentagon office on January 8th to review process for military action, including launching nuclear weapons. Speaking to senior military officials in charge of the National Military Command Center, the Pentagon's war room, Milley instructed them not to take orders from anyone unless he was involved. So now he's effectively cutting President Trump out, and he would block any orders that came from President Trump. And there was actually a part in here where they talked specifically about that. Let me find it. It was about the Afghanistan withdrawal. Milley's fear that Trump could do something unpredictable came from experience. Right after Trump lost the election, Milley discovered that the president had signed a military order to withdraw all troops from Afghanistan by January 15th, 2021, before he left the White House. The memo had been secretly drafted by true Trump loyalists. No one on the national security team knew about it, according to the book. The memo was eventually nullified, but Milley could not forget that Trump had done an end around his top military advisors. Where does he get off thinking that he has any sort of say in what happens? The president is the one who directs the military in the big actions. The Trump is the one who sets foreign policy. They're the president. Did I say the Trump?
Yeah.
Did I really? Okay. Now I'm hallucinating things. What's your take here? Why? I mean, is it just Trump derangement syndrome again? Do you have anything else to say about that?
Yeah, I did. He's the commander in chief. Everyone serves at his behest, and they don't get to make policy. If you really have a president that you're worried about, you have this thing called, is it the 25th Amendment, right? And there's a formal way to go about that process to try and get a mentally incapacitated president out of, or some other for some other reason than just mental acuity, that you can get a president removed from office. But that requires a formal process. So this backdoor dealing and subterfuge, that's just not okay. And it's what people have been saying for a long time, just how deep state we are in this country, and some of these institutions that we honor and revere, these intelligence and military institutions, have become so corrupted with politics, the same way that all of society has become.
So much of what was talked about during Trump's tenure was that he was changing the norms. It was the norms. But he was just doing things that were normal, to me anyway, like normal and like correct actions. Many of the times he didn't do everything perfectly right. But it was actually the people behind the scenes who were changing all the norms and doing things that should never have been done. This is where I think it crosses into pretty dangerous territory. Further down, Milley's fear was based on his own observations of Trump's erratic behavior. His concern was magnified by the events of January 6th and the extraordinary risk, quote unquote, the situation posed to U.S. national security. The authors write, Milley had already had 2 back-channel phone calls with China's top general, who was on high alert over the chaos in the United States. So he's talking to the China generals, and I believe later on in the article it talks about how he would tip them off if there was actual actions planned toward China. Now this borders, I don't think it even borders. I think this is treasonous, and I don't say that lightly. Like, China is, like, we're trying to be nice to China, but they're kind of a geopolitical foe in a way. And there's the United States, and China is possibly a second in power in the world. And now we're going to give them a heads up when we have something planned. Like this would be as if, in World War II, we're going to give Japan a heads up. Hey, we're going to do this to you, or Germany, or whatever. Hey, we're going to, regardless of what's going on, that's not okay. You were going to comment.
No, it's absolutely treason by anybody's definition. The problem is that you read all the headlines, and instead Milley's getting praised for reading the situation correctly and understanding the danger that the country was in after, this whole January 6th thing. And he took action where action was needed. Well, no, he was engaged with enemy number one of the United States. Now, if we reverse that, and if a general at the Pentagon had done that same thing in contradiction to what a Biden administration was trying to do, to try and undermine a Biden administration, do you think for a minute that the media would let that go and not see that as treasonous? Of course they would. So here we go with hypocrisy again.
So what's interesting, all of this is interesting, but if you recall, I think his name was Colonel Vindman. He was one of the ones who was behind one of the impeachments of President Trump. And he was kind of a weasel, and he lied about being the whistleblower and things like that. He was blasting General Milley on this. So even when you even have kind of this weaselly little figure who undermined Trump, doing some of the similar things, going around and lying about things that were happening, when you have him blasting you, you know that it's really bad. So it says further on, Woodward and Costa also write that some might contend that Milley overstepped his authority and taken extraordinary power for himself. Yeah, but he believed his actions were a good faith precaution to ensure there was no historic rupture in the international order no accidental war with China or others, and no use of nuclear weapons. Okay, Trump was mostly bluster. Trump, for everything that he did, he had the worst hiring that I've ever seen anywhere. I mean, so many of the people that were close to him were lying backstabbers. And, you know, they say, keep your enemies close. And I don't know what the saying is, but he had a terrible knack for keeping people around him who would help his agenda. There were very few people who actually pressed for him, and everyone else who did, they did so begrudgingly. And another twist on this, Milley was one of the ones in charge of the Afghanistan withdrawal. And of course, we left behind some $80 billion worth of helicopters and airplanes and technology, and left in the hands of in the Taliban, basically. Well, the Taliban has since made some deals with China, and now many people are speculating that China is reverse engineering all of these things. And so that now people are speculating, this is pure speculation, that General Milley, of course, had a plan on that, and he's like, yeah, well, now he's helping his China friends again. So there's another angle where he's actively, whether he thinks or not, helping the Chinese.
Yeah, it looks bad. It looks bad under normal circumstances, but you're living in 2021.
So yeah, we're trying to make sense of this, and I don't really know how to even talk about this intelligently, besides just throwing up my hands and going, I don't know what's going on, but it sure doesn't make sense. Anyway, let's see if I covered everything. Oh, and Nancy Pelosi was involved. He and Nancy Pelosi, Milley did, talked about this, and she was in on kind of the shenanigans and keeping the nuclear football away from Trump, so to speak. And it's just so funny that these people, just like the Vindman character and him, think that they are the foreign policy setters, that the Pentagon is the ones in charge, that the quote unquote deep state, they think that they're the ones actually in charge. And in many ways they are. This is one of the big holes in the Constitution that I think if it were rewritten in the beginning and they were able to see what happened in the future, they would have cut that off right at the beginning and put some sort of limit in what can happen. And I don't know specifically what they would have done, but there would have been something that they would have come up to try to prevent this. And I think if we had actually been following the Constitution as it was written, with taxes and not getting involved in education and healthcare and everything else, the size of the government would be a quarter of what it is now, and it wouldn't be as big of a deal.